The abandoned hotel. The Royal Hawaiian Hotel has been abandoned for, I'm pretty sure, over a decade. I do a lot of urban explorations alone, sometimes at night. The Royal Hawaiian Motel is located in Baker, California, and during the day it's scorching hot, too hot to walk around with my backpack, so I decided to go to the motel overnight. It was very easy to get there. I parked on the side of the road and walked there. There was really no fence or anything to jump over, and there was no security. It was one of the easiest structures to access that I have explored, without a doubt. In the back was a really deep pool with a lot of graffiti. I lit up with my flashlight. I went to the motel itself and noticed that half of the doors to the rooms on the top floor were slightly open or completely smashed. A bit chilling, but also expected, as the place had been abandoned for so long. Of course, other people have explored there. A portion of the motel also appeared to have been consumed by flames and partially burned. I looked around the outside for a while. It was late at night, so there were no sounds of nearby traffic, just the sounds of my shoes stepping on several pieces of debris. At one point, my blood ran cold when I heard a voice coming from somewhere in the vicinity. It sounded like a woman's voice. My first instinct in these scenarios is to assume it's some sort of security guard or someone who might cause me trouble, so I usually tend to get out of sight and hide. What did I do? I ran to one of the many rooms downstairs and turned off my flashlight. I waited only a minute, and after hearing nothing, I turned it back on. I looked around this little room I was in, and the walls were full of graffiti. There was only one piece of furniture there. It was a small dresser with about 4 drawers and an old, dirty and dusty mattress on the floor. I wondered if homeless people would come to sleep here, but honestly, it's so far from any real civilization that I doubted it. I left the room and continued around the motel. I peered into every little opening on the ground floor beneath the elevated hallway of the rooms on the top floor. Each room was quite similar with different graffiti and writings on the walls and old deteriorated furniture. Then I heard a sound of something falling from above, like something collapsing. I felt my heart go out, stopped. I went outside again and pointed my flashlight at the upper hallway, at the broken glass doors. I felt a strange emotion when I decided to go up there and check out the rooms. What I felt deep down was that there was an animal in one of the rooms, but there is always the possibility of encountering other explorers or maybe a homeless person in places like this. I went upstairs and peeked into every room I passed. All were similarly furnished with trash, debris, old mattresses, and odd pieces of antique furniture. As he walked further down the hallway, a knocking sound became audible. He grew stronger as he continued to walk. It was a steady, slow stroke, like a blow every 2 seconds. Someone was there. I approached the door of the room where I was sure the sound was coming from. As I got closer, he stopped. Maybe they heard my footsteps. I announced to whom I wish I was there. I'm just an explorer, and I don't have bad intentions. I looked into the room with the flashlight off. It was almost totally dark in there, but I'm 50% sure I saw the silhouette of a person further inside, near the back wall. The room smelled of feces. I took my head out of the room to look down at my flashlight and turn it on, but in a careful position so as not to point the light directly at the room right away. First I pointed to the floor and then looked back into the room and slowly directed the light inward. I saw 2 pale bare feet coming quickly toward me. In a muscular reaction, I raised the light further to fully reveal this woman with a bloody forehead and a yellow substance in her mouth, which was open. It was a scene out of a nightmare. I got out of there so quickly, heard the woman screaming as she ran, and her screams didn't go far away, which told me she was chasing me. I ran downstairs and went out. I ran all the way back to my car. I wasn't followed here. I called one of my good friends, Juan, who is also interested in urban exploration. I had invited him to come with me originally to this place, but he couldn't. I told him what had just happened. We came to a strange and disturbing agreement that the knocks I was hearing were this woman banging her head against the wall. That's why her forehead was bloody. When I asked if I should call the police, just thinking out loud, he said that definitely not, as he would be admitting to being on private property. I actually drove around the immediate area looking for a payphone so I could call the police anonymously and inform them about that dangerous and deranged woman, but obviously payphones are already a thing of the past, so it was a futile effort. What I ended up doing was calling the emergency number and reporting the deranged woman, but also saying that I wasn't the one who found her, but that I had heard that someone else had met her. I went as short as possible and hung up because I didn't want to stay there. I don't know if the police eventually went to investigate, but whatever was wrong with that woman, she should have been in a mental hospital or something. In all my years of exploration, I had never encountered anything like it. The abandoned hospital. A few years ago, I was living in a small town and my family decided to move 4 hours away to get us away from all the drama. While my parents were out of town looking for houses, I invited my friend over and called my cousins for a little trip. The place I wanted to go was pretty much off limits, but we were daring and wanted to experience something scary. We chose a place 2 or 3 hours away called Bryce Hospital. This place was supposedly haunted because of its history. It was a psychiatric facility where they kept people with mental illnesses. There were rumors that some of the patients were mistreated and tortured. As the population dwindled, they eventually closed the place. Bryce Hospital, located in a remote area, had an unsettling and gloomy atmosphere. Stories about paranormal events and ghostly apparitions were common among the surrounding inhabitants. They said that at night you could hear screams and wails coming from the abandoned building. The stories of terror and mystery that surrounded the hospital made it a fascinating but scary place at the same time. My friend and cousins were excited but also a little nervous about the adventure we were about to undertake. We prepared ourselves with flashlights and cameras, ready to document anything strange we might find. Over the years, the building began to rot and succumb to nature. We decided to leave around 11 p.m. to get there at 2 a.m. The car ride was quite fun, and we were very excited to see what we would find. We arrived around 2:43 a.m. and stopped at the beginning of the dirt road leading to the place. We sat there for a few minutes contemplating whether we should really do it or not, because we already had a bad feeling. After 10 minutes of looking at a dark road, we decided to continue. As we made our way down the road, it seemed like it would never end. The grass was overgrown, and there were branches everywhere. It was pitch black, and we could barely see the road. We finally arrived at the building, and once there, we all stared in amazement. It was huge, the ceiling was rotten, and there were vines growing all over the walls. In the middle of the parking lot, or what was once the parking lot, was an ancient water fountain with vines growing from the sides. It was so dark that we could only see what the headlights were illuminating. We turned off the car and left. We started walking towards the building, and the first thing I noticed were pentagrams painted on the walls. We continued walking further inside and went up the stairs, which was very difficult considering that they practically did not exist. We climbed a ladder and reached what was left of the roof. We looked around and noticed a light at the front of the building. It looked like the light of a telephone. We screamed, but no one answered, and the light disappeared as quickly as it appeared. My cousin told us to follow him to another room to make sure we were safe, but I had a terrible feeling. I swerved into another room that was right next to where they were. I looked around and saw old mattresses and more graffiti. I heard my cousins talking when suddenly I heard a faint sound, as if someone had thrown a rock against the window of the room I was in. I didn't think much of it and kept looking around. I met with my cousins and my friend, and we decided to go down to the basement to check it out. Once we arrived, we had to take a break because it was difficult to get to the bottom due to the stairs being smashed. We sat down to catch our breath until we heard a voice at the back of the room. We all stood silently looking at each other. I was too afraid to move for fear that whatever was there would come after me. My cousin walked slowly over there and shone his flashlight. When the light reached the end of the room, he saw someone crouching down looking at the wall. My cousin began to slowly back away, keeping the light on the man. Once he got back to where we were, he picked us up and started taking us out. Once outside, she yelled at the man asking if she was okay. The man turned and stared at us. There was a moment of silence before the man let out wild screams and began to run towards us. We all started screaming and running. We had no idea where to run, but we ended up going out a window. We ended up in the woods behind the building. I remember running and screaming because I heard the man right behind me. My cousins were far ahead and I saw their lanterns slowly fading away. I hit so many trees that my whole body began to hurt. Finally, I caught up with them in a clearing. We found a trail and started trying to find our way back to the car, but ended up going in the wrong direction for an hour and decided to go back and try the other direction. It was a tiring drive, but we finally saw the building again and breathed a sigh of relief knowing that we were not far from the car. As we approached the car, we heard a noise in one of the bushes near the building, and as before, a stone flew and hit my friend. We saw the man come out of the bush and had to run to the car. As we ran, the man was a considerable distance behind us, just enough for us to open the doors and lock them. Once inside, we started the car, and when we did, the headlights illuminated the man running towards us. He began banging on the windows with a glass bottle. We started the car and got out of there. The whole time we returned home, we were silent. I think we all felt the same shock. My body was shaking. After that night, we never again had any interest in exploring urban places. This happened in a field in Georgia. I was 15 at the time, and my brother Seb was 18. Seb was very interested in exploring spooky places and somehow learned about a huge abandoned house not far from us from someone he knew. I guess he didn't want to explore it alone, so one day he took me with him to go see it. Seb parked the car in a fairly hidden spot, covered by a pile of trees. The property was not visible from there. We would have to walk down a concrete path that clearly hadn't been touched in a long time by anyone. There were huge cracks with grass and weeds growing everywhere. All the grass around the road was overgrown, almost overgrown by weeds as well. Suddenly, we noticed a woman on the road walking behind us in our direction. I asked Seb what we should do, and he said to just act normal. If we started running, it would look suspicious. The woman was walking with both hands crossed behind her back as if she were taking a relaxing walk. We keep walking at our regular pace, maybe increasing our pace a bit. I turned around once more, and she was much closer now, and I could see a smile on her face. She stared at me and then said, "Nice day, isn't it?" My brother and I simultaneously answered, "Yes." She kept walking behind us, getting closer and closer. And when she was almost on top of us, with her hands still folded behind her back, she said, "I have to go to sleep now." Seb and I looked at each other confused. Without saying a word, we simply saw on our faces that it was time to speed up and get away from that woman. My brother turned one last time and said, "Have a nice day, ma'am." We kept going at a brisk pace for a while, and the next time we turned, that woman had completely disappeared from the road, which meant she must have gone into the woods, which was incredibly creepy. It was absolutely a chilling start to this little excursion. We arrived at the house, and it was visibly deteriorated. There were ivy vines growing up certain parts of the walls. Some of the glass windows were broken. which meant it had been explored before, and that's how we entered the house, through one of the broken windows. We climbed in, making sure we didn't cut ourselves with the broken glass. Surprisingly, there were a lot of things left behind, like all the furniture, although it looked a bit worn, all the wall decoration, the little decorations on the coffee table. Even when we went to the kitchen and checked the fridge, there were food items left behind, very rotten. Opening that fridge was like getting hit in the face with a smell of death. After checking the entire first floor, we went down to the basement. The basement, like the first floor, was fully furnished, although down here it was much more cluttered. There were a lot of things, such as loose sheets of paper and trash strewn on the floor. The carpet was a faded blue color. There was a little light coming into the room through the windows at the top of the walls, and then we heard a noise coming from upstairs, a distinctive thump. We both froze like statues, waiting for some kind of noise again. Within a few seconds, we chalked it up to a noise from an old, run-down house. There wasn't much else to see in the basement, so we went back to the first floor, and the only place left to check was upstairs. At the top of the stairs, if I remember correctly, was the bathroom directly in front of the stairs, and then to the left was a small hallway that led to an open door, and then the hallway turned left. I don't remember what was on the right, but I do remember why Seb and I went to the left and went into the first door, which was a bedroom, a decent-sized bedroom, but it didn't seem to be the master bedroom. There was a double bed and an antique-looking dresser. There were some old clothes left on the dresser, nothing I wanted to touch. Seb left the room first and then said my name in a very worried and scared tone. I looked at him and he was looking down the hallway. I went out into the hallway and saw what he was looking at. It was that woman from before, standing in front of the bed in another bedroom at the end of the short hallway. She was still smiling as before. He opened his mouth and said, "Do you want to see what's behind my back?" My brother yelled, "You!" and pushed me to start running. We both ran straight to the front door and ran out. I couldn't help but look back at the house, at the upstairs windows, hoping she was in one of them, but she wasn't. I also had to make sure he wasn't chasing us. We kept running until we were out of sight of the house, and then kept running a little longer, although my stamina was poor and out of breath. When we finally got to the car, I almost threw up from exhaustion. We got in the car and Seb drove us home. Throughout the trip, we couldn't stop theorizing about what had just happened. We said it could have been some crazy woman without her medication or escaped from a mental hospital or something. Maybe he was living in that abandoned house. But even explaining all of that, the big question is, what did he have behind his back, and was he holding it the whole time he was walking behind us? So many questions that will never be answered.